Opendoor just wrapped a wild, defining week. 2 powerful green days midweek, a little cooling into Friday's close and aftermarket, and, most importantly, a series of signals that the story here is bigger than price. It's about power. It's about narrative. It's about a company that's learning to channel the energy of its retail base while accelerating execution from the inside out. And this weekend, we have a unique moment to connect those dots. Eric Jackson's call for a rising dynasty of retail, Kaz Nejatian's AI-first mandate and talent magnetism, and a new data point from outside the echo chamber, Eric Trump, in a New York Post interview, specifically calling out Opendoor as an example of retail investor influence. Regardless of your politics, that's a national-level reference that shows how far this conversation has traveled. So today's video isn't a price recap. It's a playbook for what comes next when retail conviction meets leadership execution. Let's start with the obvious. After 2 huge rallies on Wednesday and Thursday, Opendoor cooled a bit on Friday and in the aftermarket. Nothing dramatic, nothing new in filings or surprises, more likely standard weekend profit-taking after a big move. That's noise. The signal is that momentum has shifted from panic to purpose. Even the down ticks have felt orderly, like the market catching its breath, not capitulating. And in that quiet, the narrative kept building. Eric Jackson posted a long, impassioned video from outside Drake's house about the middle class, retail's power, and using 1 or 2 asymmetric plays to break out of a system that often feels rigged toward institutions. He talked about stocks like Opendoor, BETR, CIFR, and IREN as potential breakout vehicles. Whatever you think of the message, it's undeniably resonant. He's tapping into identity, emotion, and socioeconomics, and asking people not just to hold a ticker, but to believe they're part of something bigger than a price chart. Here's where it gets even more interesting. In that New York Post video interview you flagged, Eric Trump explicitly mentions Opendoor by name when making a broader point about retail power. He essentially says, look at what's happening with Opendoor, the management and board changed because the voices of shareholders, retail, got loud. Again, the politics here are irrelevant. The reference matters because it shows this story is no longer contained to FinTwit, Reddit, or niche investing circles. When a figure with national reach ties Opendoor to a narrative about retail activism and corporate change, it signals that this company's journey, its governance, its culture, its pace, has become a case study for something larger. You now have high-profile voices amplifying the idea that retail isn't background noise. Retail can move management, accelerate strategy, and shape outcomes. Now, let's bring in the company side. Kaz Nejatian has been in the seat for a very short time, but is acting like the fuse has already been lit. He told the company, bluntly and publicly, default to AI. Not as a buzzword, not as a pilot, but as a mandate. Performance reviews will ask, how often did you default to AI? Prototypes should be spun with AI tools. Internal automation should replace toil. Documentation, analysis, prototyping, default to AI. That one line changes incentives, habits, and velocity. It says the old operating cadence is gone. We are a software company, moving like a software company, and we will use the newest leverage to do it. If you've ever seen a team flip from "we'll get to it" to "we're shipping now," you know how contagious that can be. Layer on top of that his note about insanely awesome talent leaving big tech to join Opendoor because they believe homeownership matters. That's not just recruiting, that's brand gravity. Talented people don't leave comfort and comp packages for chaos. They leave if they see a once-in-a-cycle chance to build something industry-defining. The message to investors is simple. Talent is a leading indicator. When top operators show up, products arrive sooner, quality goes up, and culture shifts from meetings to making. Kaz is signaling that Opendoor intends to become the best place in the world to build software for real estate, and that is a very different story than an iBuyer with spreadsheets. So what happens when these signals collide? Retail identity, public validation of retail's influence, and internal execution acceleration. You get narrative and fundamentals feeding each other. The retail community doesn't just cheer from the sidelines. It sustains attention, recruits believers, and, frankly, buys time for leadership to execute. Meanwhile, leadership uses that time to ship product, cut cycle time, compress costs, and push the strategy forward. This is where a movement can become a moat. Once you have attention, talent, speed, and data, the flywheel begins to spin. Customers notice. Partners notice. Capital notices. And yes, shorts notice. Let's ground this in specifics. Opendoor has hinted a new buyer-side product is likely launching very soon, probably in Texas. The concept is simple but powerful: meet consumers earlier in their journey, build trust long before they're ready to transact, and convert that attention into transactions when timing is right. Think about a product where browsing feels like a habit, not a chore. Think recommendation systems, design visualizations, dynamic comparisons, buyer protections, features that reduce anxiety and increase confidence. If this lands well, it does two things at once. 1. It grows the top of the funnel, so Opendoor isn't waiting around for high-intent visitors, they cultivate them. 2. It breeds data scale. Every interaction, save, like, and inquiry becomes training data for better pricing, better merchandising, better service. The more the ecosystem is used, the more accurate the machine gets. And then there's internal AI. This is not theoretical anymore. We've already seen examples in the wild, like a developer spinning a native iOS app from a spec with an AI assistant in minutes. Translate that into Opendoor's world: internal AI agents to triage support, optimize listings, generate renovation scopes, summarize inspections, draft negotiations, handle documentation. 1,000 paper cuts that used to cost time and money become seconds-long tasks. That is how operating leverage shows up in the real world. You don't always see it in a press release. You see it in cycle time, in close rates, in fewer errors, in happier customers. And when a company is honest about becoming office first, it's often because the leadership wants to speed up feedback loops and collaboration, shorten the path from idea to prototype to shipped product. If AI provides the leverage, in-office can provide the cohesion. That combo can be deadly, in a good way. Now, let's come back to retail. Eric Jackson's Rising Dynasty pitch isn't just rhetoric. It's a bet that a motivated community can keep conviction through volatility long enough to let a company mature into its strategy. Retail can't write code for Opendoor, but retail can supply patience, attention, and a refusal to let the narrative stagnate. Retail can keep the conversation alive on the weekends, ride out the red days, and welcome new holders when fear creeps in. Is it emotional? Absolutely. But emotion is part of markets. It's part of every brand you love. If retail identity can make Opendoor a story people want to be part of, it buys time for Kaz's team to do the hard work, and it puts pressure on competitors who lack a movement behind them. That said, we should be clear-eyed about the risks. Hiring stars is exciting, but stars have to ship. AI mandates are inspiring, but execution requires discipline, data pipelines, guardrails, QA, compliance. New products can miss. Macro can wobble. Mortgage rates and housing prints still matter. And narratives, especially ones connected to values and identity, can swing from euphoria to doubt quickly. The right posture is conviction with checkpoints. You can be long the mission and still demand receipts: what shipped, what improved, what's next. The good news is that Opendoor's leadership appears to welcome that pressure. They're communicating publicly, they're embracing speed, and they're signaling that this is a build culture, not a brand management exercise. So here's how I'd think about next week. First, watch for details on the Texas buyer product, what it does, how it's positioned, and what early metrics leadership cares about: engagement, conversion, attach rates. Second, keep an eye on talent announcements or breadcrumbs that indicate where the new hires will focus: AI infra, pricing R&D, consumer product, or ops automation. Third, look for evidence that internal AI agents are moving from the back office to things customers can feel: faster responses, smarter recommendations, better listing quality. Fourth, note the tone in the community. If the OpenArmy is calm and focused, dips will likely be absorbed and attention will stay on execution rather than day-to-day volatility. And finally, keep the housing data in your peripheral vision. New home sales and sentiment have been supportive. If that continues, it creates a tailwind under whatever Opendoor ships. I also want to say something directly to the OpenArmy. This week you've been told, in different ways and by very different people, that your role matters. Eric Jackson said it loud, as he always does. Eric Trump, in a totally separate conversation, pointed to Opendoor as an example of retail influence reaching the boardroom. And Kaz, by sharing his memo publicly, acknowledged that investors aren't children to be coddled, they're partners who deserve a window into how the company is thinking. That is not normal corporate behavior. It's a sign of a more open, more iterative, more software-like company culture, and it aligns with a retail community that wants to feel involved. That alignment is rare, and if it holds, it can be powerful. Does that mean straight up from here? Of course not. The path will be volatile, like it always is in disruptive stories. But the reason this weekend feels different is that the story just got bigger than a ticker. It's now a conversation about who gets to shape companies, the ETF complex and passive flows, or the people who actually care enough to learn the business and hold the line through the ugly days. It's a conversation about whether home ownership can be made simpler by people who love software more than they love bureaucracy. And yes, it's a conversation about whether movement can become a moat, retail energy attracting top talent, talent shipping faster products, products attracting more customers, customers generating better data, data compounding competitive advantage. That's the flywheel. That's the dream. So here's the takeaway I want to leave you with. If last week was about survival, absorbing a big institutional seller, watching Jane Street flip the narrative with a fresh stake, and clawing back from a shaky start, this week is about intent. Retail intends to be taken seriously. Leadership intends to build at the speed of software. Talent intends to join because the mission matters. And the market, in the quiet of a weekend, is giving everyone a chance to breathe and look forward. When the bell rings again, the scoreboard will do what it does. But the bigger battle is already underway. Can Opendoor fuse a grassroots movement with elite execution and become the default platform for buying, selling, and, soon enough, dreaming about homes? My view, the ingredients are on the table. A community that refuses to quit. A CEO who speaks plainly and moves quickly. A talent magnet that's about to switch on. And an industry that is begging to be modernized by AI. If that flywheel catches, we're going to look back at weekends like this as the moment the story outgrew the chart. For now, keep perspective, keep your checklist, and keep your eyes on what ships. From retail to boardroom to product, and back again. Onwards and up.